to another episode of The Writer's Dream. The Writer's Dream is a program where writers, authors, playwrights, people who write things can talk about their writing, their publishing, and their marketing. If you're interested in finding some really good books or some really good authors, you can watch the show on YouTube. You can watch it on Cablevision 20 on Fridays at 3 o'clock. You can get video on demand here at ltveh.org. There are many places you can find us. We have a Facebook page, and if you're interested in being on the show or asking a question, please message me through Facebook. The page is called The Writer's Dream. Can you imagine that? So today's guest is Joseph E. Scalia, who is an author, an artist. He is also a writer of children's stories. He's a retired teacher, and he's the elevator operator in 120 Broadway.
I was. Yes, it was going to be my career.
Well, you elevated people, right? You did end up elevating people by teaching English.
It was the summer before I started teaching that I operated the elevator.
And his book today is UFSD 71, and for those of you who don't know what UFSD means, it's Union Free School District. And give us like an overview of the book.
Well, you have to understand, first of all, that teaching was a temporary job as far as I was concerned. I was going to get into teaching. I was going to write a best-selling novel. I was going to be on the Johnny Carson show. I was going to date very attractive women. As long as my wife didn't find out. I was going to be driving a Porsche 911, and then I started teaching, and 33 years later I retired. So the best laid plans.
Well, every author takes a journey to produce a book.
Right.
So what would you say was unique about your journey to write this book?
It was actually being in the classroom and seeing what a difficult job teaching was, and the crazy people that are in the, that
yes,
are there.
Me too.
And
spent 30.
I resigned my first day. I went in my first day, and after all of the meetings and the craziness and stuff, I went home and I wrote a letter of resignation, and I came in and I said to 3 of the teachers that I had just met, I said, I'm resigning, and they took me apart. They said, you haven't even taught a class yet, and you have to give them 30 days. So I took the letter of resignation and I put it in my jacket pocket, because we had to wear jackets and ties at the time. And I carried it the whole year, and I got through the first year, and I went back, and I went back. And it was in my sabbatical year. Remember sabbaticals?
No.
Yeah, 7 years, my 8th year, I was on a sabbatical, and that's when I started writing the book, because I had enough characters and background and stories and stuff.
Oh, you have some characters in this book.
I do.
Believe you me. We have a mutual friend who
Okay.
told me that when I interview you, to be sure to talk about a short story that he read that you wrote, called The Day He Died.
The day I was killed in a car accident.
Is that the name
That's
of
the
the
name
day
of the short story. And what I did is I incorporated the short story into the book. And it's a true story. The year I started teaching, I was driving a 1951 Mercury, which I had bought 3 years before for $75. And it was a great car. I never changed the oil on it. There was no maintenance, no upkeep. And I lived in Brooklyn, and I was teaching out on the island, so I would do a 42-mile one-way commute, 84 miles a day. And one day, the car broke down on the Southern State Parkway. And so I left the car, I went and I called, but I didn't have the school number, so I called my aunt who lived in the town. I taught in Hicksville. And I asked her to call the school and let them know that I had a slight accident, because I didn't want to say my car broke down, and that I would be in as soon as I could. And my aunt called, but she called the wrong school. I was at the junior high, she called the high school, and of course nobody knew me. And so when I didn't come in, Because when I walked back to the car, the tow truck was there, and the guy said to me, look, he says, I have to make some other calls. So I ended up going on the ride with him. I didn't quite get to school. When I didn't show up at school, the people at the junior high called home, and they spoke to my Italian-speaking grandmother, who knew that I had left for school and that I wasn't there. And they knew I drove an old car, so my grandmother called my aunt. We lived in a three-family house. We were all related. And she called my aunt, and my aunt came down and spoke to the secretary, and the secretary, my aunt knew I had been killed in a car accident immediately. And so my mother was working, my father was working. So they were all upset. They didn't want to say anything to my mother and father, so my aunt called her brother, who was the butcher who lived around the corner, worked around the corner. He came over. Meanwhile, someone in the high school figured out that I might belong to the junior high. So they called the secretary there, and they said he had an accident. They left the word slight off. So now when my relatives got together and they called, they got the message that I had had an accident, therefore I must be dead. 3 hours later, I show up at the school after...
Were they glad to see you?
Well, the school was glad, but the secretary said, you better call your family. So I called up, my grandmother answered the phone. Nonna? I said, Nonna, it's Joe. Boom, boom. She thought I was calling.
This could be a movie.
This is a true story. It's a true story. And that's what happens to the character Jesse, the new teacher. He has that same experience. So yeah, my journey, what I tend to do is I write from the experience. As you know, and as a creative writing teacher, when I taught in the junior high and the senior high school, I would always say, write what you know about. And so I bring in the things that I know about and the things that happen to me, and that's what this book is all about.
Well, you asked me for my take on the book, so
Yeah.
I'll tell you. I found the book to be satirical,
Yeah.
sarcastic, okay, a bit dark,
I'm 3 for 3.
too close to what I experienced as a teacher,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
sometimes hysterical, absolutely so funny. So funny. So did I get it right?
You got absolutely. That's 4 for 4. That's what I was aiming for. I can't read that first 25 or 30 pages, which is the first day. The book counts down the 1971-72 school year. So the first chapter is 182, which means how many days are left, and then it goes down the way.
I wondered about that. I got a little confused
Yeah,
there because
and
I was
well,
on chapter 75, and then all of a sudden I was on 69.
Well, what happens, it's referenced in the text. They talk
Right,
about so many,
right.
the calendar, so many days. But
Well, you had a planned format. You actually started with the news in the United States.
that was the most recent thing. I was trying to anchor it, and a friend of mine said, well, why don't you put the news in there? So what I did is at the beginning of each month, and I went through and I scoured to find out what was going on, and I anchored that to the events that were going on in school. There's no real politics. Nixon is president, the war in Vietnam is going on, and it's reflected in the attitudes of the students and the teachers in the book. But that historical part at the beginning does anchor it. Yeah.
Well, you have so many clever things in there. For instance, the name of the high school, Rosencrantz
Yes.
and Guildenstern. Now, who else but an English teacher would?
Right. And it's the wife of the president of the school board who saw the play Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead, and she wanted to honor these men, these famous men in history. See, there are jokes in there that English teachers and other teachers will get, but it's not simply a book for teachers.
Well, the name of your main character, the young teacher who comes to work at this school, Jesse Teachin, and it's Tietjen. But if you say it, it's Teachin.
Teaching. And you brought that to my attention, so that's one of those, as Bob Ross would say in painting, one of those happy little accidents that occurred.
Yeah.
And it's very obvious as soon as you mention it. Wow, what was I thinking?
There are so many things that if you are a teacher, though, like for instance the AV squad. I love the AV squad because they wear brown shirts with lightning bolts on their, on their patches. And if you know AV squads in schools, I hope I don't offend anybody.
No,
here,
it's
but
true.
They tend to be a little bit controlling.
And they're peculiar. The kids are the peculiar kids that kind of get involved in AV.
We are going to get killed on this.
We had a guy, the guy who was actually in the school where I worked, he was an incredible organizer. And if you crossed him, though, you never got what it was that you wanted.
That's why teachers hoard these things.
Right, you got a projector and a film strip, or you got a tape recorder and a
film
and a movie, right? You know, so yeah.
I know, yeah. It's really it's too much. Anyway, the whole morale of the school brought to my mind a cartoon I saw once in a magazine, and it was a Roman bireme, and all the slaves are rowing the ship, and the guy with the drum is coming around with the hat, and he's saying to the slaves, "Could you give me a few cents for a new drum?" Right? Exactly. Yeah. That's what it was like in the 70s.
Yeah, yeah.
Education was not well supported.
Right.
The budgets were all going down. People in the country were depressed because of the war. And
well, the revolution had taken place. The Beatles' attire. The character Terry is kind of me 15 years into the thing. Long hair, beard. I stopped wearing my jacket and tie, which caused it was great shame.
Oh, yes.
Great shame. And the women wanted to wear pantsuits. Yeah.
You know how we did it in my school? Our principal was a World War II veteran. He was very conservative. He didn't want to hear about us wearing pants, so parent night. All the female teachers wore pantsuits.
Right.
And he said, "It's all right as long as the top covers you behind," more or less. Talk about me too.
The women in the junior high got together in advance. They were all going to come in one day, and the principal found out about it. So what he did, they were coming in on Monday. He put out a notification dated Friday in the mailboxes Monday morning before the women came in. So in effect, he gave them permission to wear the pantsuits.
Well, that was nice.
It was, but the thing is, he had no choice in the
it
matter.
was definitely a wave.
Yeah.
And little things like no paper towels in the bathroom, no toilet paper, you had to bring in your own. I mean, it really, people say these are outrageous, but it wasn't.
Well, that was the austerity thing. We would be on austerity like every third or fourth year, and I thought, how funny. Of course, you couldn't give them supplies and stuff, and I thought, what could be beyond that? And beyond that would be to take the toilet paper and out of the student bathrooms, but then you had to do it with the teachers too. So for the whole year, the teachers are walking around carrying their own toilet paper.
In the 1980s and the early 90s, I was on what they call the Administrative Advisory Council. It was a bunch of teachers. We sat down with the administrators and talked about the school, its problems, its curriculum, whatever. The first 15 or 20 minutes was always taken up by the bathrooms. The condition of the bathrooms, the lack of toilet paper. And one day I finally said, could we just once, maybe next month, not talk about toilet paper?
Well, I was a union delegate for a number of years. And I used to deal with things like the quality of the plastic utensils in the teacher's cafeteria. You know, I mean, the world is coming down around us and we're worried about or two teachers that shared a classroom and were not very friendly would complain that one teacher complained that the other one wrote on the board too hard and the board couldn't be erased. So that petty little stuff.
Oh yeah, yes, it was very much like that. But my favorite story is the story of Helen Odell.
Oh,
Would
Helen.
You please?
Yeah.
Because in my school we also had a lunch robber, a lunch stealer.
Yeah. Helen Odell she's made up. She didn't exist, but a lot of the characters are really based on people. And the principal, who was M. Seymour Baltz is his name, who's very Richard Nixon-ish, is concerned because someone on the faculty is writing about him in the men's bathroom walls. And so he carries out a military operation, and part of it is to gather intelligence, and Helen Odell's job is to go through the teachers' desks and the garbage pails and stuff to gather intelligence. And she's taken it upon herself to go into the faculty room and to go into the teacher's refrigerator and liberate cookies and stuff. She's constantly eating throughout the story.
Throughout her short
Throughout
tenure
her,
in the
but
story.
I won't. I don't want to ruin it. I don't
Okay.
want to. No, spoiler alert. You know, she's the only thing funnier than Helen Odell's situation is when they finally get rid of Helen Odell in.
Yes, we won't give that away
won't give
because
that.
it really is a very, very funny part of the story. Another one of my favorite characters is Virgil Loomis.
Virgil's God.
Okay.
Virgil is actually, I didn't have a Virgil, but there was a kid I never had in class who used to kind of go lump down the hall with his, and he'd be smiling and he'd be laughing and all knees and elbows and stuff, and so he became the character. But Virgil is always there. Virgil sees everything. Virgil hears everything. He's got insight. And like the stage manager in our town, you know, he's aware. And everyone likes Virgil. Everyone.
Yeah, he's a great character, and he's very resourceful.
Yes.
Isn't he?
Yes, he is. He's resourceful. He's intelligent. He's insightful. He's compassionate. He's all of those things.
And he knows how to work the system.
And he knows how to work the system.
Which
Exactly.
is the most important thing.
Yep.
Right. So this book took you a really long time to write.
Yes,
Why?
I started the book on sabbatical in 1971. And I wrote it, I typed it on a manual typewriter with carbon copy. And then I started to edit it. The beginning was better than the end. And then I put it down, and then I picked it up again, and then I put it down. And there were long periods of putting it down and rewriting. Every time I would start, I would have to go back to page 1. So when computers came in, I put the first half of it on the computer, and then I lost my drive. Not my computer drive, but my own drive. And I started again, and it took me actually 45 years from when I started it to when I finished. I finished it in my 20th year of retirement after a 33-year career of teaching.
Well, I think if you had finished it in 1971, it
Different
wouldn't
book.
have had
Yeah, totally
any-
different.
Most of the insights that you
Right.
had, because I think first of all, the times changed.
Right.
The attitude towards education on Long Island
Right.
changed. I
Right.
thought it changed drastically
Yeah.
in the time I
Yeah.
was there. People began to realize that this was a place where they could send their kids, and the kids could stay there from 6:30 in the morning till 4:30, 5:30, 6:30, who knows, at night, and that it would help them to get into college and blah, blah, blah. So the support for schools on
Right.
Long Island, which are very good,
Yeah.
increased. And as you age, your attitude towards people becomes
I
more...
changed, right.
Oh, yeah,
You know, in
more accepting.
1971, it was a gotcha book. You know, I'm going to blow the lid off the teaching business, you know. And then I loved teaching. I loved it. I did
Me
it.
too.
I mean, it was terrifying, but I loved it. There's a lot of pressure. A good teacher, I mean, you know a good teacher because a good teacher makes it look easy. But it's a lot of pressure, and I came to respect the people that I worked with, and we're still a very close faculty, even all of these
Yeah, same here.
years.
We have an
Yeah.
organization
Yeah.
in Seaford, and we meet twice a year, and it's
Yeah, we get
it's
together
great.
every month to celebrate birthdays. Now we go to wakes.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
I
what
don't wanna hear
happens.
about that.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
know. So are you thinking about writing another one?
No, at 45 years, I don't think I'd be able
I
to.
mean some.
Well, I
because
am
you
writing.
have children's books.
Yeah, I do have I have a children's book that just came out this week. It's called Pea Father and the Earwax Elf. It's
Pea Father and the Earwax Elf.
right. It's based on a visit to my
Why did I think it would be Ducky Doodles and...
Yeah. Well, when I went to see my grandkids in Florida, I always tell them stories like, you know, in my country, with the banana, we throw the banana away. We eat the peel. You know, and in my country, the kids don't go to school during the week. They stay home. They go on the weekends. So, and then I would make up all kinds of stories. So we had a discussion about magic, and I brought up the earwax elf. And my grandson Joe said to me, there's no magic and there's no earwax elf. And I said, oh no. I said, he puts the wax in your ear at night. And that became the basis for the story. And it took probably about a year. It's illustrated. Jen Ball, who is part of the Liqui group, did the illustrations, and it's out. It's on Amazon.
So you're a member of Long Island Children's Writers and
I am a
Illustrators.
member of Long Island. I don't go to the
That's
meetings.
That's where I met you.
I know.
But I also organize the author illustrator nights.
That's true.
That's my excuse.
That's right.
You
I
too,
see you
you're
at the
on-
meetings.
That's right. You're on my committee.
That's right. I see you at the committee meetings.
That's how you get out of meetings.
That's true.
That's very funny. You should join Long Island Authors Group.
Yeah. So I've reached the point where I'm just enjoying myself, you know, and having fun. And when I'm not writing, I'm painting now. So.
What are you doing to market this book, to get it out there? Besides this?
A lot of, well, this is great.
Well, you get
I'm
a
so
lot
glad.
of exposure
Yeah,
from
I'm
this.
so glad that you invited me. I put notices on Facebook. A lot of my Facebook, I have 1,000 Facebook friends, and a good number is made up of former students of mine. So I've been able to sell some books on there. I feel a little kind of like, tell you what I'm going to do, you know?
I know, yeah.
So, but I always title it Shameless Self-Promotion, and then I tell them, you know, where they can find the book and buy the book and stuff. And,
Yeah, you have to get over that. Buy
Yeah,
my book
yeah.
thing.
Well, you know, at the author nights, but it's not a book for kids. This is a book for parents.
No, you
Yeah.
don't want the parents reading this.
I could market it as a workout book. You know, it weighs 2.2 pounds. You just have to, you don't have to read it, just lift it over your head.
Yeah, my copy is dog-eared from dropping it. So, and you're also an artist. So tell us about, these are your beautiful paintings.
Well, thank you, thank you. I started painting watercolors probably about 1995, shortly before I retired. And I never took an art lesson until about 4 years ago. I took my first art class. And I used to paint landscapes, because even a bad tree looks like a tree. You know, so, oh yeah, it's a bad tree, but it's a tree. And I took my first class with a woman in New Jersey, and now I've been painting with Jan Guarino here on the island, and she has made me fearless. So I would never have tried to do stuff like this.
No, I love them.
This one was done
all.
yesterday. The man. I've learned too, when you do a portrait, don't put the picture next to the watercolor, because people say, does it look like the picture?
Yeah, this is all watercolor too. Which
This is
a
watercolor,
difficult
yeah,
medium.
yeah. So these were all done this year.
Very good.
Yeah.
And where do you show them? Now, when you go to an art show, do you bring your books?
Well, I really don't do too many art shows. If I had an exhibit several times in the Farmingdale Library, but the paintings are on the wall, you know, so
Yeah.
there's really nothing. And the old people that go there, they
don't
walk
buy
through
anything.
and they say, oh, are these new? And they keep walking.
And what about when you do book events? Do you bring your art to your book events?
No, I don't think that.
You don't mix the two.
Yeah, I don't think
Yeah.
that it would work. And no one who's going to go and buy a $15, they aren't buying $15 books. They're not going to buy
True.
a
that's-
watercolor for.
That's true.
Yeah, I've done some craft shows, some art shows, but Farmingdale does art in the park.
Right. I've gone to that one.
Yeah, but people are more lookers than buyers.
I think so. I
And
think that I find lately that's the same way with books. You know what I
Yes.
find them doing? I find them taking your bookmark with all your information on it and probably going home and ordering the book on Amazon.
I find that they do that and
And
don't
ebooks.
order the book on Amazon.
Well, I think also if they find out you're an ebook,
Yeah.
they want the ebook because all the kids have tablets now.
Yeah.
So there's a change in the industry that we have to-
Actually, if you sell on Amazon and you have an ebook, royalty-wise, you get a higher percentage on an ebook than you do on a
Yeah,
a
you do.
paperback.
You do, but it ends up the same amount of money.
Yeah,
So that's
Yeah.
why I think they do that.
yeah.
And I put my books on Audible for free. I
Did-
could tell you
did
how to
you
do
read
that.
them?
No, because I don't sound like a 17-year-old girl.
Yeah. Someone said I could do this. This book is 665 pages.
Yeah.
I couldn't even, I can't read that first 20 pages of the book without getting.
See, I could see where you could find somebody who has a website or a blog who features this kind of stuff, and then make, it's not a podcast, that's for TV. What's the one for sound?
Audio.
An audio
yeah.
pod, whatever they call
Yeah.
it, and just excerpts from the book.
Yeah.
And then just do them over time
Yeah.
and put them on a blog.
Yeah. One of my former students did that with his books, and he sent it to me, and I said, "Oh, it's nice to have you reading to me for a change," because I used to read to them in the class.
All right, we have about a minute left.
Yeah.
Give us some advice for those budding student writers out there.
Do it. You have to make the commitment and actually do it, and don't be and don't do it for anyone else. Do it for yourself.
Yeah.
That's what it comes down. I write, I paint, I do things for myself.
Yeah,
now.
I also think that a lot of people who write are perfectionists and they keep revising as they're writing.
Yeah.
Don't do that,
No.
just write.
And use a computer and save, and save as, so that you have all of the old versions of it, because sometimes you want to go back and
And
find it.
sometimes just the idea of writing a book is daunting. I mean, 600 and how many pages there? It's daunting. And so start with something smaller, write a little short story
Right.
on the same topic.
I used to do with, I taught creative writing, and I would give them a 12-sentence short story to
There you
write.
go. And then expand
And then
it.
you can expand. If you can write a 12-sentence short story, you can write a novel.
That's great, Joe.
Thank
Thanks
you
for being
so
on
much.
the show.
Thank you, Lynn. Thank you.